Okay, I'm gonna get started. Thank you again, everybody, for being here. My name is Molly Tolsky, and I am the founding editor of HeyAlma and the editor of Feller, which are both publications from 70 Faces Media. And we are here to talk about repairing relationships in the post-October 7th world. This is a topic that's come up many, many times from so many of our readers over the past over 11 months. And it's, as soon as we kind of announced this panel, we got hundreds of people to join because I think this is something that so many of us have been feeling within our Jewish communities and our families, outside of our Jewish communities and families. And I'm super grateful to the people who have joined us tonight, who are really experts in this sphere and are working within their own communities, helping people figure out how to stay in relationship and in community with people who we maybe don't completely see eye to eye with, or maybe we completely disagree with, but still see some value in wanting to maintain those relationships. So I am going to just quickly say who's on the panel, and then I'm going to let them introduce themselves. But we are joined today by Ginna Green, Rebecca Powell, Emilia Diamant, and Rabbi Rena Singer. And I thought that maybe we can start just by having you all go around and introduce yourselves and just briefly what you do, and then the ways that you've seen this issue come up in your own communities over these last several, almost a year. So yeah, maybe Ginna, do you want to kick us off?
Sure, happy to. Great to see everyone who's joined us tonight. Thanks to Molly and Vanessa and the HeyAlma team, the 70 Faces Media team, for convening us and having this conversation. It has been something that has been on everyone's hearts and minds for almost a year, which is, hard to actually say that part, that it's been a year almost that we have had relationships be so tested and so hurt, and people so tested and so hurt at the same time. For me, I'm Ginna Green. I am a consultant, an independent rabble rouser. I do a lot of things in the Jewish community, in the progressive community, and in the Jewish progressive community. And so one of the key ways that I've seen this challenge surface and be really problematic is both in homes and in actual shuls and communities, but also in work and in workplaces. And because of my work in politics, I'm actually seeing so many people feeling unsure about whether or not they can trust someone because of their opinions on Israel and Gaza, and whether or not they can even consider remaining in relationship because it is so tough and it is so challenging. And so many people have retreated from space and wondered if this is something that they can actually pursue, which is why when Emilia actually reached out to me about the possibility of this conversation, I was like, you're going to be there. I'd love to be there to talk about it, because I'm definitely seeing people really suffer, both personally, familially, like within their families, with friends, and also with their jobs and with their workplaces. And that feels really tough, because that means that some folks in our community are experiencing this in multiple different ways. And so I'm holding all of that and the ways that people can experience these types of challenges so differently. The one thing that I'll say before I pass it to, I don't know if you want to go next, Molly, if Rebecca's next, or if it's Emilia or Rabbi Rena. But one thing that I will say, the premise of the conversation, right, around repairing relationships, particularly post October 7th, one thing that I think is important is that recognizing the boundaries of your own relationships was important before October 7th. And recognizing when, as my father would say, the juice is worth the squeeze, for someone to be in a relationship with another person is a calculation and an assessment that we all should be making, absent major challenging events that rock our worlds and our communities. So this is a concept and a topic that is not just for now, but is actually for always. And so this is both timely and timeless, and I'm glad that we're having it today.
Thank you so much. Whoever, you guys can just jump in. Or I'll say Rebecca.
Great, happy to go next. Hello, everybody. My name is Rebecca Powell. I'm the program director at Resetting the Table. And Resetting the Table is an organization committed to dialogue and learning across charged political differences. So this is what I talk about all day long, and I'll echo the thank you to Molly and Vanessa and the HeyAlma team for putting this together. In our work, we work with both Jewish communities, whether that is a synagogue, or in my case, I oversee all of our college campus programming. So of course, campuses have been a flashpoint issue. And in particular, a lot of the work we focus on is intra-Jewish communal work. So even within the Jewish community in campus hillels and other Jewish spaces, there's been, incredible disarray, incredible hurt, incredible just community dissolution around these issues. But I'll build on something that Ginna said, which is that this is not, while we are in a flashpoint moment, this is in a context of issues that have been going on for a really long time, right? Both on Israel-Palestine issues on college campuses and beyond the Jewish community in general, but also in the American political sphere, right? There was a poll after the 2016 election that found that 16% of Americans had stopped talking to a family member or a close friend over politics. And so if you do the math, that's the unraveling of 50 million relationships. And I think that it's probably increased since then. It's been a while since 2016 and a lot has happened, right? So this is actually in the context of something that's been happening for a long time and is happening in both within the Jewish world, but beyond it as well. And I'll say that something that we hear related to relationships is that in so many Jewish spaces, people on all sides, no sides, feel like the Jewish community that they once belonged to or that is there for them to be a part of is not for them. It is not speaking for them. And I hear every single person with every opinion saying that. And then the staff members who are trying to create those spaces feel like nothing they say or nothing they do is a win, right? It's going to alienate someone. So what we're trying to do is really figure out how can we be in community while holding those differences at the same time. It is incredibly challenging, but I think something we're going to get into in more detail tonight.
Thank you so much. Rena, do you want to go next?
Hi, everyone. I'm Rabbi Rena Singer. I am a rabbi in Congregation Emmanuel in San Francisco, but I just moved here from Chicago. So I have some Midwest experience and some West Coast experience. And I'm also the co-founder of Modern Ritual, which is an Instagram and online Jewish educational resource for relevant, beautiful day-to-day Judaism that my best friend, Rabbi Samantha Frank, and I started with no idea whatsoever that it would be this hard to try to educate in the online space. And I'll say that because as somebody who does that part-time, it's quite different than my community building work in person. And I've seen so much fear and trauma lifted up since October 7th in person in the Jewish community. I've had parents talking about their children are no longer talking to them or they're having terrible fights with their children. I've talked to couples who say, my friend posted something online and now I don't want to invite them to my wedding. I've seen rabbis get letters from former B'nai Mitzvah students saying I've never been more disappointed. And yet that all happens in relationship with human beings. And then online, I'm sorry, this to be, a downer, but I just see complete rage and fury. So I do think there is a stark difference.
Rena did one
there. But what I see, oh no, did I freeze?
You briefly froze, but you're back. We're good.
I'm back. Right. what I see in all of that is a lot of just like need surfacing, and a question of like how can we learn what we need differently in this moment.
Thank you. And last but not least, Emilia.
Hi, everyone. Just again, thank you to the HeyAlma 70 Faces team. Really excited to be in conversation with these three incredible folks. I'm here with a few different hats on tonight. One is that I'm a licensed clinical social worker, so I have a background in social work and in therapy and in understanding the way that we show up to relationships and in the way that we heal. I'm not here to give therapy advice tonight. My only therapy advice is if you're not in therapy, if you grew up in a society or you had a childhood, you should be in therapy. That's my advice to everyone all the time, always. I know it's not that easy, but that's my big thing. All of us, particularly in this stage of the world, need nervous system regulation. But also I'm here as the Chief Program Officer at Avodah. Avodah for 26 years has developed lifelong social justice leaders whose work is informed by Jewish values to inspire the Jewish community to work toward a more just and equitable world. And the bulk of our programs are with folks in their 20s and 30s. And we've been navigating this last year in deep community. We are lucky in that we work with young people who are motivated by a deep sense of justice and a deep desire for Jewish community. And that also means that things have felt really hard. And we've watched young people flock to us. Honestly, we saw a huge outpour of applications into our programs and a desire to be part of intentional Jewish community and just like have Shabbat, but also a deep rift in relationships with parents, with synagogues, with relatives, and a yearning for a way to kind of make sense of that. And I think the big thing that I keep coming back to is a need for two major things and a calling for two major things. One is listening, because I think and the internet is part of this. I both deeply love and am deeply frustrated with the internet. I know Rabbi Rena, probably as someone who's makes a lot of their time on the internet, it's a tool and the devil a little bit. So we need some deep listening. And that also the other piece, I'm really heartened to see at least one of my best friends who's not Jewish here, the understanding for inter-Jewish communal conversation to also be understood by our friends outside of the Jewish community, because I think there's some resonance that needs to happen here, and some understanding of the pain that's happening internally, because I think there's just some mirroring that I think we need to be doing, and some understanding that we need to be doing of the work that we're doing internally outside of our own community, in order to be able to be more effective in the way that we communicate outside of ourselves, as well as just inside. So I'll leave it there for now.
Thank you all so much. I did want to say that anytime throughout our discussion, people can feel free to leave questions in the chat box. They're just going to be sent directly to me and the other moderators. I know many of you also, I'm so grateful while you registered for this event, you left really thoughtful questions and comments, and we read through everyone, hundreds of them. And, I don't think we'll be able to necessarily speak to everybody's unique situation, but there's definitely themes and overarching issues that we will touch on. I guess I wanted to start because, I really hope people leave this panel with some concrete tips for like leaving and like going out to like help, work on these relationships that they want to work on. And I'm wondering if before we get there, we could talk a little bit about how you decide whether a relationship feels worth working on, because it is hard work. And I saw in a lot of the questions we got too about timing. Like I haven't spoken to my cousin since October 7th, which is again almost a year ago. I haven't, stopped talking. I blocked this person 5 months ago. Is it too late? So thinking about, I guess, both, yeah, timing wise and maybe just the type of relationship it is, whether it's between friends or family. How do you all suggest actually figuring out for somebody whether this particular person is somebody that they want to do the steps to repair with? And feel free to jump in at this point. And
can I start? And I want to piggyback on something Ginna started with. And this is what I say again. I talk a lot to young people, and I talk to a lot to young people who argue on the internet. And I, especially teenagers, when I tell them, I say, don't argue on the internet. First of all, that's just like a blanket rule with anyone, regardless of what your relationship is with them. And I sometimes catch myself. I don't want to be here saying that I'm perfect. Like I've done it before, and I have to catch myself and say, no. Timing is like kind of irrelevant to me. It's about, do I want to be in relationship with this person going forward? What is the relevance of this person and vice versa in my life going forward? Do I want to invest in them? And do I want to spend the energy, emotional, mental, physical, right? Like our nervous systems get activated when we debate about important things. When we put the emotional, mental energy, right? Our bodies get tense, right? Our stomachs, Jews, our stomachs get activated, our bodies get, right? Like you have to really think about what do I want out of this conversation? Am I trying to convince this person of something?
Yep.
Or do I want to continue building a relationship with them? If you're going into the conversation saying, I need to convince this person that I am right and they are wrong, I would encourage you to rethink it, because it's going to end poorly. Because they're probably going to come in with a similar approach, or they're not going to come in with a similar approach, and then you're going to be met with resistance. I know this is a little different than the question you asked, Molly, but like coming in with an approach of, I want to hear what you have to say, and then listening and then saying, thank you for sharing that with me. Can I tell you how that made me feel? Or can I tell you what I'm thinking and feeling? Because then you're building a relationship, right? And that is the reason that I start there is if that feels good to you to do with that person, then go ahead and do it. If you're like, no, I don't want to do that, then I think that's
you probably shouldn't do it.
You probably shouldn't do it. And that's okay. The same way as we say, like, it's sometimes okay to quit a job.
Yep.
Sometimes it's okay to let people go. Now, I'm not saying to do that with your kid. I'm not saying to do that with your parent. I'm not here, but like with your cousin, with your like boo-boo down the street, like you don't have to do it with those people, but you have to assess each individual relationship on its face and make those decisions.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I say with my clients who are in Jewish community and the progressive community, and we're working on strategy, we're working on campaigns, we're trying to get things done. Question is, what do we want to be true at the end of whatever it is that we are doing?
Yeah.
And I think just to underscore what Emilia just said, like there is an assessment, and doing the math on each person feels really, really important. And I also agree. I think we're going to find that I'm going to always agree with her tonight, probably. So I'm just going to like name that right now, that the time horizon is also completely inconsequential. Whether it's 5 months or 5 years, I think that if you're willing to have done that math and willing to be in conversation, then it's fine. I will also say that there is that, like, you can also try and want to change someone's mind. Like you can try and want to bring someone along. And what I will tell you that if that's what you want to do, if the relationship is important enough to invest that energy, and you also want to try and bring them to your side, the only way you'll do it is with empathy and respect. That's the only way it happens. So if that's what you want to be true at the end of the conversation, that you want someone to have maybe changed their mind, you're not going to be able to go and have cocked and willy-nilly and not respectful of where they're coming from or who they are, even if you might not be able to necessarily respect that idea that they hold. You have to be able to respect and empathize with the fact that someone you love holds it.
Yeah, and I'll add like something that I've been thinking about a lot. We've been thinking about at Resetting the Table that sort of fits what Ginna and Emilia have just been saying is know your role and know your goal, right? Like, what is your role in this conversation and what is your goal, right? And think about, you know, do I want to convince this person? Do I just want to maintain my relationship? Do I want to fix my relationship, return to it, whatever it is? And there's different strategies that can help you achieve each of those goals. And I think we'll talk more about how to set up these conversations later, so I won't jump ahead. But I think, you know, knowing what do you want out of this conversation and why do you want to reach out to this person you haven't talked to in a year and what's the purpose can really help ground you. Something else I'll say is that you may be thinking, well, I wish I could be in that conversation, but that they're just too beyond the pale. Like they're too far away. How could I even start that conversation? How could that even go well? And we're in a cultural moment where a lot of us are holding red lines pretty close to ourselves. Like you should have red lines. You should take care of yourself. You should know when you're ready for a conversation and not what crosses those lines for you. But I think that a lot of us have a little bit more room to stretch than we think, than we give ourselves credit for. And there may be people who you agree with on a lot of things, and it's just this one issue, or you used to be really close together, and now you seem to be diverging. And it's very likely that we have some misconceptions or just incomplete information that if you have that conversation, you may find out you were right. You know what? I'm not going to say you might not find that out, but you may find out that there were some perception gaps and that there's something that you didn't understand that can actually be really reassuring. So I think like if you have the space and that feels okay, just stretch yourself a little bit for the sake of that relationship.
Yeah, I will say, in terms of timing for myself, I think that I have needed that time. Like there are people for whom too soon after October 7th, we were both in too raw of a place where I felt like if I respond to this person now, it's not going to be good. And I think we're getting to a point where I'm like, you know what? I actually do want this person in my life. It's the time to reach out. And I'll just add that it is Jewish relationship repair season, right? Like we're heading into our yearly season of like, what are our relationships? How do we talk to people? How do we repair with God, spirit being, whatever, and with each other? And that we do that every single year. So there's really no statute of limitations on like relationship building. And that I do think it's a spiritual skill to say like, what am I scared of? And what conversations how do I not fall into just like, well, let's not talk about it again. For some people and times that is healthy and that is the right thing to do, of course. But I agree with what Rebecca's saying that there are times when it's great to push ourselves and there's real power in relationships. So it can go both ways, which makes it harder.
Well, thank you, of course, to the rabbi for reminding us that the holidays are coming. sooner than we, realize.
Gotta have a rabbi on the panel. It's just like, okay.
And yeah, I love it. It kind of is a built-in opportunity, even if you feel a little bit scared to bring this kind of thing up. It's like, hey, this is a pretty good excuse to have these conversations. Let's get into some of the practical things I know we're all itching to share. And I'm wondering if you can share just practical steps for first broaching, like you've done the work now of what do I want out of this? I do want to work on this relationship. Great. We're there. So now what? What's like a good first step to take for somebody who has somebody in mind that they want to work on this with?
Rebecca, I believe that's you. Like you kick us off here, I think.
Great. I can start us off here. So I think for one thing, right, there are times where you just find yourself in these conversations, and a lot of what I'm going to say can apply there too. But I think we're talking really intentionally, right? This is a person you want to reach out to, you want to have this conversation with, maybe do some repair, have a do-over, or broach it because you've been avoiding it. Right. And so I'll say you should make that, I think, invite pretty explicit, right? To say like, I want to have this conversation about X. Like, do you want to do that with me? Because there should be informed consent about entering into this conversation. You don't want to ambush this person, right, into having a conversation that they're not ready for. Because just like you need to be ready for it, they need to be ready for it too, for us to have the best possibility of the success. And then once you're in the conversation, right, that you've initiated, I'm going to outline a little bit of our process, which if you go through a training or a workshop with us, you learn all the skills associated with it. But I think that the process is going to make sense to people. That essentially you start off by inviting them to share. And what you have to do, and this takes so much work, right? What you have to do is try to listen while pausing your own reaction to what they're saying, so you can fully take in what they're saying. And to listen, listen for the areas, we call them signposts of meaning. Listen for the things where it seems like this was really important to somebody, right? Whether they use language like that was the most frustrating thing that ever happened to me, or they're tearing up, or they're raising their voice, right? What are they saying in those moments? Did they really explain it? Or did you just notice it and then they sort of kept going? You want to ask into those things to make sure you're really understanding, what is this person trying to communicate to me? Not just what are their talking points that might not be my talking points, but like, what is that at the heart of it for this person? Once you think you got it, try it. Say, okay, let me see if I get it. For you, it's this. Is that right? And they may say, yeah, and, or they may say, that is not what I meant. Or they may say, that is what I said, but now that I hear it back, I don't like it anymore, right? And so you'll try again. And because you want people to know that they have been understood as they wish to be understood. Now, I want to say that very crucially, reflecting somebody, showing your understanding is not agreeing with them. It is not validating with them. It is not the same thing. You are just showing, I got you, and I got you on your own terms. And doing that is going to, whether they realize it or not, let them take a breath, right? Let them say, oh, this person really tried to understand me. They didn't make me into a caricature. They let me talk. Because you're going to try again. You're going to say, did I get that right? And they say no. And you're going to say, so it's this, so it's this, so it's this, until they're like, yes, you got it. Until they have nothing else to say. And then they actually have the space, the receptivity to hear you when you say, you know what? I see this really differently. Can I tell you what I think? And they actually are going to be able to turn off their brains a little bit instead of preparing their own talking points to rebut you, because you have slowed down the conversation, showed them that you have respected them, like we heard before, right? You respected them as a full human being, not as a list of talking points. And you've took the time to understood them, much more likely that they're going to take the time to understand you back. That's what I got for now.
I'll say, if you see there's any resetting the table training in your area, attend it, because it's completely worth it. It will help a lot. If you don't have that, I would call a friend and who is not in this conflict and say, this is the conversation I want to have. This is what I want this person to understand. Like, how does that sit with you? Like, find somebody who you trust and practice with them first. I don't think it's overkill. I think that people will reflect back to you like, oh, so it sounds like this is what you want, or this is what you're saying. And I think that that can sometimes help lead to a more productive conversation.
Yeah, practicing this, having these kinds of conversations where it's lower stakes. It's like, oh, we disagree on this thing, but like, it's okay. We're good with that. Let's just try it. It can be really helpful as prep work.
I'm wondering, do you see a different approach when it comes to family versus friends? And I think, so many of the questions that we got, and I think many of the most heartbreaking ones that we got were between parents and child, but from both ends, from the child's perspective, from the parent's perspective, or people who typically these are not people we are making, like, it feels like we are in relationship with them. It doesn't feel like a choice, where it feels like a friend is somebody you seek out and you can, it's kind of more in your control. A family, you might be seeing them because you're around other family members. Or you might, you've always been really close to your family and suddenly there's this big rift. And I wonder if there's a different approach to that kind of relationship.
Yeah. Yes. The stakes feel right, like the stakes there are different, right? And I think the function of what Rebecca just said does not change, right? I think the relationship is different, and so there are going to be dynamics that like shift the way that the conversation moves, right? There's going to be a shift very often in the conversation that Rebecca just talked about. What's going to likely happen is you're going to revert back to adolescent and parent. And there's going to be whatever dynamic existed in that stage of adolescent and parent, like however that dynamic existed, is going to remanifest. So if that was a healthy one, great. If that was a challenging one, you're going to see it again. And even when you were in a healthy adolescence, there was probably argument, and there was probably some sort of healthy argument. And so like, remember what that was like, both from the parent and the child side. And hopefully if you're out of your adolescence and you're in your early 20s, you've done some thinking about like what it was like to argue with your parents as a kid and identified some of your patterns. So that's why this pre-work of thinking about like, what was it like to argue with my parents about, I don't know, homework or curfews or bigger issues around where you wanted to go to college or what you wanted your life to be like, right? And for parents, remembering and grounding in the fact that your child is now an adult and has, even if they're, not yet 25, and their brains aren't fully, the frontal lobe isn't fully formed, they really have, giving them the benefit of the doubt that they have thought through this and that they have a fully formed idea and that they really care about this, and not coming in with the assumption that they don't know. Right? On both ends of this conversation with parent and kid, I think we can come in with the assumption that my child just doesn't know. And if I just explain to them in this way, and I think this particularly happens on the parent side because part of a parent's job is to teach their child a lot of stuff. I'm just going to teach my kid this stuff and then they're going to understand. Right? And it's part of a child's job to resist everything that their parent tells them and to just like say, nope, and rebel, right? And so if we can both go into that conversation, cognizant of that dynamic, cognizant of the tendency to revert back to kind of adolescence in argument, and if we can really try to see each other as human beings, I'm not going to say equals because you're not going to strip away the kind of stuff that's in there. And the biggest thing that I'll add, and kind of Rebecca was sort of naming this, but like have water, be in a comfortable place, like design the like, don't do it in a bedroom, do it on the couch, like find it, like do it somewhere that feels comfortable, especially if this is a parent-child conversation. Do it somewhere that's good, or go outside, like go somewhere that's neutral third party that doesn't feel like the kid going back to the home might actually be challenging, right? Because then they're literally back in their childhood space, right? Think about all of these pieces because they really matter, depending on how severe the conversation might be. If it feels a little lower stakes, let it be lower stakes. But think about think about the kind of the things that are going to lead to this point that are going to allow you to be successful. And remember again that there's like a person in front of you. It's not just your kid. It's not just your dad or mom or parent. There's a full human being in front of you with a lot of stuff. And that's a good thing.
The only quick thing, Molly, that I would add to this conversation is that other sort of set of relationships that I've seen be really challenged, which are ones that are happening like in workplaces and where people feel like they cannot bring their full selves because their team members made this comment or said that thing. And I would just sort of translate some of exactly what Emilia just said to the workplace, meaning that there are power dynamics and relational histories between people that are going to be at play in those types of conversations that are true. And so being aware of those dynamics, asking the question, what do we need to be able to be true at the end of this? We have to work together. We have things to accomplish together. And so that means that we have to be able to be in this place of empathy and respect. So just want to name and see all the people who feel like they can't be who they are at work right now and feel like some of these conversations for a year have not been happening. And so it has really hindered their ability to be who they are and be successful in their own work. I see those folks, I see you, and you can take the advice that Rebecca and Emilia have given and apply almost exactly to conversations in workplace spaces too, and being mindful of power dynamics, relational dynamics, and histories as you have those conversations with those relationships too.
I will say that I think that stories tend to be way more powerful than facts. My family, my dad and I specifically used to revert into the same argument over and over again, where he would say, like, in 1980 something, Omar offered this thing to this people. If you've ever been in that kind of argument, you know what it's like. And it's not as effective as saying, here's how I came to understand here are my stories of if you are a parent, I think that you have incredibly different experiences of Israel, of anti-Semitism, of all of these things than your kid might. And tell those stories to your kid and help them understand, why do you feel afraid right now? Why do you feel however you feel? And same with if you're a kid, I think that story, child of your parent, telling those stories to each other goes way further than getting into a parliamentary debate style argument.
And it's not just that you think it, the cognitive science research actually says that stories work better. They actually do connect with people and create that space for connection. So it's not just a thinking, it's a knowing.
We got one question that is just very practical question, which I appreciate, which is, if you can't actually be together in person, is it ever okay to have this kind of conversation over text or on the phone or video call? What's the best option if you're not going to actually be able to sit down in a room together?
I just want to point out Emilia's face. I think we both made the same face.
Not text.
Not text. Right, exactly. I think we can accept a Zoom call. Right.
I think Resetting the Table has been doing a lot virtually, right, Rebecca?
Yeah.
So
we've been doing a lot of trainings virtually. Forced by COVID, but it's effective. If we've been able to continue it in certain communities where we can't get there for whatever reason. Video call, yes, but with the video on.
Yeah,
you got seeing each other's face. No
text messages, and definitely not in the comments.
Even in the Instagram DMs,
no. Correct. Yes. No.
I will even say to folks who I've started conversations in Instagram DMs with, we'll start sending voice notes even to each other, so we can clock tone. And then I'll say, do you want to talk about this sometime? And we've gotten on, it's helped, mostly with friends and colleagues.
I'm going to be the devil's advocate here. I have some friends who have a really, really hard time with confrontation. And I think that if you are I have had full multi-paragraph typed out conversations with friends who we don't have that kind of relationship where we're going to pick up the phone. And so I think if there's a way for it to happen, I agree that calling, FaceTime, whatever is better, but it can happen.
Thank you for text messages they thank you for championing them.
Don't do it with your child.
Yeah, I feel that's again a different kind of.
If they won't pick up the phone to speak to you, I would just say, "Hey, I really love you, and I want to talk about this, or I want to not talk about this, and what have you." If there's a barrier there, if that's the only way you can reach out to someone, but I would just encourage you, if someone is very close to you and you're trying to have a meaningful conversation with them, I do not think text message is the way, if it's a bridge to a larger conversation.
That sort of made me think about what if you do reach out to somebody and you kind of ask for them to have this conversation and they say no?
I'll say I think it depends on where you are and what's been going on in that relationship, right? If it's just somebody who, okay, like I thought it would be interesting for us to talk about this, then okay. But if it's the real source of hurt, then you might need to wait until both people are ready. I will say that I think another version of this question is, okay, can we just set it aside and say, you know what, we're gonna continue being in this relationship, this friendship, this whatever it is, and just we don't talk about Israel. Like we just don't talk about that. I don't think so. I mean, I think you can do it temporarily, and people might actually disagree with me here, so I'll be curious what you all have to say. But I think that if it's a difference that matters to both people, like if this is just like, oh, that would be such an interesting intellectual conversation, sure, you don't need to have it. But if this is something deep for you and it's getting in the way, then you're going to see somebody's Instagram post. You're going to hear them make a comment that, and it's going to boil up, and eventually it's going to boil over, right? And so I do think that addressing differences head on, eventually, when you're in a space where you're ready to do it and you can do it well, is actually really important than trying to pretend like it doesn't exist, because it'll get there eventually.
Yeah.
I'm curious, do other folks have people in their lives that you just don't talk about, whether it's Israel, Palestine, that you just say, I'm not going to talk to this person about that thing, but we're copacetic, but we just don't talk about that thing? I'm just curious.
No, I don't. I can't. No. I have I have like people on Facebook and Instagram, like, right. Like I have like parasocial relationships, personally, but I think a big thing that has happened, I would say in the past decade for me has been, and I know I think some of this is generational potentially. I wonder about that. And I also think, Rebecca, what you cited around like relationships shifting, I think there's a lot of tension there. I think some of it's geographical. I think like when I lived in North Carolina, I do think there was a lot more of like wondering and not talking about things and being curious about things. Whereas like I can build, you can build your bubble or you can build your universe in different ways depending on where you live. But I think some folks cultivate differently, and are able to cultivate differently. And I do think what I've seen with young people is that they really are very clear, particularly young Jewish social justice folks are like, no, you have to be. And sometimes it gets into purity testing, which is like a different conversation of like, you have to be 100% in agreement with me, which I actually don't, right? Like we have to be fundamentally in the same place, like on the basics. We can diverge on but we have to be able to talk about it, right? We have to be able to talk about it even if we disagree. We can have a basic we can have a bit of nuanced disagreement, but we can't have such a huge rift that we can't talk about it without devolving into screaming, right? Or total breakdown.
I'll say I have, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I'll just say I have family members who I love very much, for whom I just feel like we could talk about this. It wouldn't be that enjoyable. And it's not a great use of my time or energy in the way that I care about this issue to talk about it with them. And I have a good relationship close to them, and they post things that drive me crazy. And I just feel like, well, that's who they are. Like, and we could talk about it, but I don't really want to, because it would take a lot of my time and energy, and I want to use that elsewhere when it comes to all of this.
And that's an example of the math, right? So going back to the very beginning of the conversation, familiar relationships. They've got more in the can, maybe, right? So like, you don't have to, like, you love them. They know you love them. You know that they love you, perhaps. And it's okay to be, I'm not going to have that conversation with them because everything will still be okay, even if we don't. But some of the math with someone else might not math the same way.
I'm wondering if you all can talk about what is a reasonable expectation to have going into the first conversation with somebody about this, and what happens if that expectation isn't met or the conversation really does not go the way you had hoped it would go. What's the next step after that?
I could give it a shot. This is a hard one, I think. I think a reasonable expectation, right? Like, this is a process, right? This is probably not all going to be figured out in one conversation. And we've all said at some point that you're going to have different goals and different conversations. I think that, a little bit more understanding of the other person, a little bit more, correcting maybe something that you thought and relearning that actually they think this way. Just like a nugget more. And also feeling like you were listened to, at least, right? Like feeling like you got to say your piece. Like, I think that is just such a win, right? Even if at the end of it, you're like, we still really disagree, or I'm still really angry, I'm still really hurt, any of those things, but I'm like, just one step forward, right? And I think at the end of the day, even if you have the best conversation, you may still really disagree, but you can come to some sort of mutual understanding of, oh, look, I disagree with you, but I understand how the story of your life has led you, right? Like Rena was saying, like, has led you to believe that, right? Or whatever it is, that mutual understanding, I think is the ultimate goal, and expecting it to go slowly. It's not always going to happen, right? I facilitate conversations that sometimes people leave and it's been transformative, and sometimes people leave and they didn't get what they wanted out of it, for whatever reason. Or I've had that in my personal life too. And I think it's doing a reassessment, like what we've been talking about, is it worth it to try again to me? Or was this too much? Right? I think that's going to be person by person, situation by situation, of if you feel like you have that energy to try it again, and both people want to do that. But like, you're allowed to take some time, right? Like, you're allowed to, you don't have to do it tomorrow, right? Like, I think on the last point, something was saying that I don't think there's anyone in my life where I'm like, I just don't talk about this at all, and I wouldn't. But I took a pause, right? There were some friends who, after October 7th in particular, I was just like, so how's work? How are your kids? Like, how are your pets? Like that, we just kept it there because I wanted to maintain that relationship until I had the energy to do it, right? And so that's the same goes as, it doesn't go well. Okay, are we trying again, or are we done?
Expectations are tough because it's like, I would say lower them. I would say shift them. I would say go in just with a hope rather than an expectation, and a hope of both listening and hearing. I would say go in with less of an expectation and more of like a goals for how you want to show up. Because that's the thing you can control. The only thing you can control is how you show up. You can't really plan for how the conversation is going to go or how they're going to show up. You can set yourself up for success, and that's what you can do. And again, just like really stressing the nervous system stuff, right, around like preparing just to like take care of yourself, because we need to show up well for tough conversations. Right. If you're going to do strenuous exercise, you like bring water and you bring other things that help you prepare for that. So it's the same thing here.
If you're all free to stick around for a few more minutes, I'm seeing a lot of questions that are sort of along the lines of like, okay, you've made the assessment that this person maybe isn't worth putting this energy towards, or you did try to have a conversation, it didn't go well, it doesn't seem like you're ever going to really see each other or see eye to eye, but you're still going to see this person, whether it's somebody in your social circle, somebody you work with, somebody in your extended family, you're still going to see this person and they still might bring things up about this that upset you. How do you handle that, or how do you prepare for that? Or how do you guys think about that?
So there's two ways I would say. One is if there's a digital interaction, if you're not comfortable like unfriending or blocking, there's muting and like unfollowing functions. So if this is a family member and like and blocking them would like create a family group chat that would explode, like you can just mute Uncle Todd. And if you need help doing that, someone can help you do that, right? Like do those things digitally to set those boundaries for yourself. And if they keep bringing up in person, this is why we need therapists. You have to set a boundary and you say, hey, we tried to have this conversation, or I wanted to have this conversation and it didn't happen. I'm going to ask that we not do this. And I love and respect you, or whatever the language is. And you can script that out for yourself. If boundaries and confrontation is hard, like Rabbi Rena was saying, she has a friend who's like, and if it needs to be a text because it keeps happening, like what is the way that is going to set you up to set that boundary? Right? If it needs to be via text, if it needs to be in person, if you need to have a buddy with you, right? Like, and if there's something in the workplace, Ginna can probably speak to this, then there's a whole nother level of if they're continuing to antagonize you in the workplace, that's a different conversation. But for family or friends, like if someone is continuing to show up in a way that is harmful to you, you have every right to set a boundary. With a friend, you can make a very clear boundary of like, no, I'm actually not going to spend time with this person. Or if I know they're going to be in a social situation, I'm going to say to other friends, please don't put me in that situation, or I'm going to nod and move away. Family, there's other things that need to happen, right? You need to set clear boundaries, and you have every right to do that, especially once you've made an attempt to repair or move this relationship in a positive direction.
And I would say if the conversation leads itself to a less productive place than before the conversation, which sometimes happens, just underscoring what Emilia said about your boundaries and your protection, and no one should be a victim of abuse or harassment. And so like if stuff is escalating and happening, then you need to be able to take certain steps that might go beyond muting or blocking if things actually do get challenging and dangerous. And in the workplace, if it's happening, then certainly see management, human resources department, if you have one, your supervisor. There's probably a process at your work, hopefully a process at your work for those types of things being escalated if you feel as if you're being harmed or harassed for the difference of opinion.
I will say if none of those, boundary crossing, escalating things are happening and you're just uncomfortable, something that helps me is like diving deep into armchair psychologizing. I am not a therapist, but I like to pretend that I am one. And I try to make up stories about people and say like, wow, something really hard must have happened to this person, or there must be a big reason why this person is responding this way that has absolutely nothing to do with me, or something that I don't know. And that helps me be in relationship with people who I find challenging. You may know the reason, you may not, but I like sometimes even making it up.
I think that's I'm giving you permission to do that.
Thank you.
Don't say it out loud to anyone else. Don't get into like the business, but
Yes.
Permission granted.
One of the questions we got through the registration form from somebody that I thought was very meaningful, which is, how do I mourn the loss of a friendship or relationship that ultimately feels irreparable due to exchanges we have had? about Israel and Palestine. And that just even the use of the word mourning, it's really heartbreaking, right? It's like that's not, how you want to be thinking about a relationship. But I think many people have experienced this. And if people have gone to that place where it's like, this is just not working anymore. Any advice for that person?
Maybe Emilia.
Rabbi Rena, we have beautiful grief rituals. I was gonna say, like, kick it to the rabbi. There's not that you need to do full shiva, but like there are beautiful grief rituals in Judaism. And mourning. We're also, again, to go back to Rabbi Rena's mention of Elul, we're in a reflective period, and if this is a time to take stock of some of those things, and friendship loss is real, and it's not something we talk about enough. I feel like there's a HeyAlma article somewhere that's about that, maybe, if it hasn't been written yet. Who's writing it? Right? Like this is real, and friendship loss because of difference of opinion on something really significant is important, and it's an important loss to acknowledge. Mikveh is a beautiful ritual, even if you just need to go in a body of water, right? And take a moment to acknowledge it that way. Find a way to actually mark it for yourself. That's fine.
Yeah, I will say the language of mourning is really powerful, and probably more, it would just even calling what you're doing mourning and putting it in that context, I think is a really, really good start. Saying you're experiencing true loss, and that's something that is just going to take time to contend with. The Jewish calendar gives us kind of artificial periods of loss throughout the year of like, let's mark, this has been a week, this has been a month, this has been a year. So I think kind of keeping track of time for yourself. And I'll say that I once learned from a rabbi who, after a week of Shiva, would come to a family's house and would walk with them around the block, just to say, like, you've experienced this period of time, and now I'm going to be with you as you enter into the world again. So even just like taking a symbolic walk with yourself and saying, like, okay, who am I in the world now that I am moving on from this relationship and moving on?
Yeah.
That I think can be really powerful.
Thank you. Yeah, I love that. Okay, I think maybe the last thing I want to leave the audience with is, if any of you, like everybody who came here obviously is thinking about this and maybe has, somebody or somebody's in particular in mind, what's their homework assignment leaving this virtual room with us? What's the first thing, maybe something they can even do tonight to start the wheels in motion of this work?
I'll jump in. I'll say, one, if you've identified a person who you want to have this conversation with, the homework is to invite them to have the conversation, but I want to talk about a little bit of the prep work that can maybe make that go well. And some of that is, right, you have a sense of what they think, because that's the reason why you've been avoiding this conversation. And I actually encourage you to do a little bit of research and to try to find what you think are op-eds, commentary, social media posts, things that reflect both the best and the worst version of what you might hear from them, right? And I'll say, like, so the things that you think, like, it's probably in your head is probably the worst version, right? Because that's what's building up the anxiety. And you think, like, this person is just, like, how could you possibly think that, right? Like, there's a version of their argument that we were just like, I just don't even understand how you could have arrived at that. But I'm going to encourage you to also find the best versions. Find versions that sound smart to you, that sound, oh, I don't agree with that, but I get it. That's really convincing. I see that it's compelling in some way. Because if you can think, okay, like, now I'm going to go listen to this person, I'm going to listen fully. But you've done a little bit of like, I I understand the arguments that I might be hearing, and you may be surprised. You might hear none of those, right? But if you have a little bit of preparation for something that might feel really hurtful that you've already encountered, but also for something that might surprise you, like, oh, I think this person's actually following this line of thought that I understand. That can be really good setup for before you even get into the conversation, to challenge yourself to find good versions of an argument that you disagree with.
I love that. Anybody else have any homework for us?
If you're a journaler, journal for 5 minutes. If you're not a journaler, talk to someone for 5 minutes, voice note for 5 minutes. If you're not any of those things, do something for 5 minutes that is a reflective practice. Shower, do the dishes, something to just think through what this conversation has got you stewing on. If you need a journal prompt, write a letter to one of the people that you're thinking about. Not to send, just a letter.
I am contractually obligated to jump in here and say also, if you are a journaler or you're not a journaler, as Vanessa just put in the chat, HeyAlma is having a Jewish journaling class, October 9th, I believe, right in the 10 days of repentance. And it's exactly to like access your feelings, and it's going to be wonderful. So you should all check that out.
This doesn't feel as concrete as what Rebecca and Emilia just shared, but I think one of the things that I try to teach my children is to always be prepared for the answer to be no, and to go into any conversation, just to underscore what Emilia said before, lower your expectations and then maybe lower them a couple more times after that, and just be prepared for your hopes to not be met. Be prepared for it not to feel great at the end, and be prepared for there to still be more to do. This work is asymptotic. We get close to that axis, but we never really approach. We don't get right on top of it. And I think it's important to just go in with your eyes as wide open as your heart.
I'll just say, ask yourself, am I really prepared to try and understand where this person is coming from? If it's my child, if it's my friend, if it's my parent, like, am I willing to say, like, how did you come to this understanding? What are the stories behind it? Like, please let me know more. And if you're not there yet, that could be okay. Like, you might not be ready for that. But I do think that wanting to understand is necessary for the conversation to be successful.
Thank you all so much. This has been really illuminating, and it's been so wonderful to hear from you all. I hope, thank you everybody for coming, and I hope it's been helpful. And I hope as we go into the high holidays, we all have some tools under our belt and some inspiration. And yeah, wishing you an early Shana Tova, and thanks for spending your Monday night with us.
Yes. Shana Tova, everyone. Thanks.
Shana Tova, thank you.
Whose cat?
Yeah.
Whose cat was that? We didn't hear from the kitty all night.
Great timing.